Be sure to follow me on Twitter. There you can keep up with all the updates from Comics Explained and talk to me directly. So as we get into our discussion about Batman Zero Year, what we're going to find here is that while Batman didn't necessarily get a full continuity reboot, that is to say, he didn't see the same kind of reboot as characters like Superman or The Flash, what we're going to find is that for those of you guys who were interested in jumping into the Batman series, that Batman Zero Year is going to be a great place to start, because in truth, the story of Batman and his parents is really an ageless tale. And so what we're going to do as we progress through the story is that we're ultimately going to pick up with Batman already being an adult and arriving back in Gotham and ultimately undertaking the mantle of Batman. And so what we do as we start here with Secret City is that we find that we're basically picking up with the Red Hood gang. And again, this is a really cool tie-in with Scott Snyder here in terms of what he's using for the Red Hood gang. And the reason why is because, as we'll see as the story progresses, Scott Snyder is basically using a combination of the original 1951 Red Hood, but he's also using, using this in conjunction with the Alan Moore Red Hood. And the reason why I say that is because what we find is that the Red Hood gang is, of course, involved in some kind of a robbery, but the Red Hood gang does not identify themselves by name. They simply identify themselves by numbers, the leader of course being Red Hood 1, and the others are referred to numerically, most presumably based on their rankings, that is to say, where they stand in relation to the respect among the other gang members and Red Hood 1. So Red Hood 2 would most likely be the second highest person up, and so on and so forth. But again, what happens here is that as this bank is being robbed, the bank manager seems to stand up to this gang member. He seems to stand up to Red Hood 1 and simply tell Red Hood 1 that he really can't do this, that he really can't get himself involved in this capacity. And so what we find is that Red Hood 1 instructs Red Hood 5 to kill this bank manager. And so Red Hood 5 simply knocks the bank manager unconscious. Now initially, this is I wouldn't go as far as to say a shock to Red Hood 1, but what it does is it puts him on alert. And the reason why is because, as Red Hood 1 describes to us, Red Hood 5 murders people without any real regard. And so the fact that he would actually knock this bank manager unconscious as opposed to just killing him is again really sort of an alert to him, really something to indicate that things aren't what they're supposed to be. And so what we find here is that as they're basically interrogating him, as Red Hood 1 is beginning to put the pieces together, he realizes again this is not Red Hood 5. And so what's revealed to us is that as Red Hood 5 begins to battle the other members of the Red Hood gang, that we learn this is actually Bruce Wayne. And again, this is basically a reintroduction. This is Bruce Wayne picking up with becoming and returning to Gotham as a vigilante. And so once Bruce Wayne is able to attack, or at the very least thwart, the Red Hood gang, he's ultimately able to escape into the sewers and escape back home. Now the difference here with the way this story goes is that Bruce Wayne didn't simply just arrive at Wayne Manor one day and then immediately undertake the mantle of Batman and start attacking people. Instead, Bruce Wayne's actually living in the most crime-ridden part of Gotham. And this is kind of interesting for a couple reasons. The first is because I would go as far as to say that it gives Bruce Wayne a really good understanding of what crime is like, of what it's like to live in that part of the city. But what it also does is it basically puts him in the lion's den. He knows exactly where to go and who it is that he needs to get to. But what's happening here is there's also a mishmash of other things taking place in Bruce Wayne's life. One of the most notable things is that Alfred Pennyworth is really debating with Bruce Wayne. For one, Alfred Pennyworth doesn't like the idea of living in this brownstone, or this sort of red and brickish kind of apartment, which is what they're actually called, brownstone apartments. But he doesn't like living in the heart of Gotham around these crime-ridden areas. But more so than that, what he really wants to see Bruce Wayne do is step into the role that had been left vacant by Thomas Wayne. But Bruce Wayne is really, doesn't want to get involved in this. He really doesn't want to join this concept. And this, again, gives us some very valuable insight into the mindset of Bruce Wayne, because what it tells us here is that Bruce Wayne doesn't care about the material things. He doesn't really care about being, a major part of Gotham, which is ironic, because as we'll find in later comics, especially when we get get into the Court of Owls and the Night of Owls, Bruce Wayne is most effective in being able to change Gotham when he's fighting the war on two fronts. One, when he's able to contribute financially to the city of Gotham to revamp the areas that need to be revamped, but also when he's carrying out his vigilante role as Batman. But again, as the two of them begin to talk and as the two of them begin to continue, this is when we really see Scott Snyder drawing on the various incarnations of the Red Hood when he tells us that the way the Red Hood is able to bolster their ranks is through a combination of blackmail and threatening. Now again, this really seems to draw more elements from Alan Moore's Red Hood than it does the original 1951 Red Hood. And the reason I say that is because during the Killing Joke, when Alan Moore was effectively giving us the origins of the Joker, the way he had done it was basically telling us that Joker, I guess the person who would become the Joker, was shanghaied into it. That criminals were going around with a red hood and they were, I guess, approaching people who had some kind of inside knowledge about the place the criminals intended to rob. And what they would tell these people is that they were going to be the inside man, that the hood was going to be a way to protect their identities. But in reality, the hood was designed to basically depict them as the leader of the Red Hood gang. And so if for some reason they were caught by the police or they were seen by the police, the criminals could point to the Red Hood and say that he's the leader, he's the one that orchestrated the whole thing, and they could simply escape, leaving the person who was basically tricked into the situation to be left at the behest of the authorities. And so again, what happens here is we learn a lot more about this entire concept. We learn a lot more about what's going on with Bruce Wayne. Again, tying to this idea that he has a mishmash of things going on, one of the things that happens here is that he meets Jim Gordon for the first time as he's operating under this vigilante attitude. And of course, Jim Gordon makes his stance known, and the stance of the Gotham Police Department, in no uncertain terms when he says that, of course, they know about this vigilante who's going around and trying to stop criminals, but that ultimately the role of stopping criminals in the city of Gotham lies with the police. And the problem here is that if one man is able to do what he wants in order to try to curb crime, then because it makes him a vigilante, other people may take up the cause, and it would lead to a state of lawlessness. And in truth, this is a very reasonable argument here. This is a very valuable argument, because if everybody were to carry out their own manner of justice, then there would be no true justice. Justice would be left to the perspective of the person who is carrying it out. And so while one man would say that a person who steals from him should maybe be imposed with some kind of jail time, another person may say that if a person steals from him, they should die. And so there's no real standard for justice within the city. And so this is one of the reasons why Jim Gordon seems to be so avidly against the vigilante. Now again, Jim Gordon doesn't really tell us this per se. We're just kind of left to interpret this. We're kind of left to believe that this is most likely the case, which I would go as far as to say that most likely seems to be what's going on. But again, we see that over time, as we get through this first Secret City event, that Bruce Wayne is basically continuing his attempts to stop the Red Hood gang. And in one of the most notable instances, he actually undertakes the disguise of Oswald Cobblepot. And what this tells us is that Oswald Cobblepot is basically in existence at this point in time. He's already operating as perhaps some kind of criminal element. But again, what happens here is the Red Hood gang realizes that this is not Oswald Cobblepot, that in fact it is Bruce Wayne. And so while they don't know that it's really Bruce Wayne by name, what they do know is that it's the vigilante. And so what happens here is, of course, Bruce Wayne is able to escape one more time and grab Oswald Cobblepot, who's currently tied up in the bottom of this blimp, and then ultimately get the two of them away. But in addition to this, this complex series of events that are really making things difficult for Bruce Wayne in terms of being a vigilante, we also continue on with this path of him as the man Bruce Wayne. That is to say, the fact that he's trying to remain hidden from the public eye. Because again, at this point in time, Bruce Wayne was declared dead by his Uncle Philip Kane. And in fact, his Uncle Philip Kane tells him this when he takes him to Wayne Tower, and again, tries to basically do the same thing that Alfred Pennyworth had done, where he tries to get him to step into the role of Thomas Wayne as the leader, the head of Wayne Enterprises. But again, Bruce Wayne really kind of shuns this. But all this really comes to a head when Alfred Kane exposes Bruce Wayne to the press, ultimately leading to Gotham realizing that Bruce Wayne is in fact alive. And what this does is it really kind of backs Bruce Wayne into a corner. If Bruce Wayne were to simply say, or he were to acquiesce publicly and say that he has no intention of taking up the mantle or stepping into the role of heading up Wayne Enterprises, then he would destroy the morale and the perception of Wayne Wayne Enterprises, and it could even go as far as to cause the company to go bankrupt due to the fact that shareholders would most likely bail out, in the sense that if the heir to the company won't even have anything to do with it, then why should they keep investing in it? And so at the same time, we see that eventually, Philip Kane meets with Edward Nygma, who again at this point isn't really playing the role of the Riddler, but is still a relatively sinister person. The reason why I say that is because what Philip Kane does is he basically speaks with the Riddler in saying that what's taking place in Gotham right now is a power struggle between the Kanes, who were previously in charge of Ace Chemical, which was bought out by Gotham, or by Wayne Industries. But we also see that Wayne Industries is trying to maintain its power hold on Gotham City itself. That is to say, the company's trying to maintain its stature. And so what Edward Nygma says is the only real way for Philip Kane to fix this problem is to kill Bruce Wayne. And what it would do is ultimately generate sympathy for Bruce Wayne, or for Wayne Enterprises, which in turn would turn public opinion on their side. Of course, Philip Kane turns down this idea, and so what Edward Nygma does is he goes about his own accord, and he hires the Red Hood gang to kill Bruce Wayne instead. And so again, as Bruce Wayne is trying to stop the Red Hood gang, what we see is that all these pieces sort of begin to come together at the very end, when we see that Bruce Wayne meets up with the Red Hood gang, and the Red Hood gang, realizing who he is, confront him in his home and almost beat him to death. Now, ultimately, the leader of the Red Hood gang shoots Bruce Wayne and leaves him for dead, but of course, Bruce Wayne is able to get back to Wayne Manor, and Alfred is able to tend to him. But again, this really just kind of covers the events in Secret City. This really gives us the ideas of what it is that ultimately leads to Bruce Wayne as he begins to undertake the role of Batman. And what we'll find here in the second section in Dark City is that he ultimately takes over this mantle. He ultimately becomes Batman with regards to his stance in Gotham City. So with Dark City, what we do here is we pick up right where we left off with Secret City, in the sense that with Bruce Wayne having escaped the presumed death at the hands of the Red Hood, that he's being tended to by Alfred. Of course, Alfred is doing what he can to make sure that Bruce Wayne's wounds are taken care of the way they need to, so of course he doesn't contract any kind of an infection here. But what happens is that after Bruce Wayne is finished being tended to by Alfred, he begins to go and inspect the grounds of Wayne Manor. And what he does is he stumbles across a hole that he had previously fallen in as a child, in which of course he had been rescued by his dad. But what he does is he basically gives us a very touching moment here. And this is what I really enjoy about Scott Snyder's Batman, because in previous versions of Batman, we didn't see very many of these moments. These moments were really isolated to him, maybe recollecting various memories about his parents, and to a degree it's the same here. But what he does is he begins to speak with his father metaphorically, of course, speaking to the spirit of his father, or the memory of his father, and saying that he feels like he's failed in his role to protect Gotham, and his attempt to come back and to restore Gotham back to the way it was before. And so what he does as he begins pondering these things is what he decides is the best way for him to carry out this mission is to simply not do it as a man, because as a man, again, it can be perceived that he's somebody who can be killed off. And so what he does is he adopts the mantle of Batman here. And so what we do is we switch to the Red Hood gang as they're unloading some chemicals from a warehouse that they're presumably robbing here. And what happens is that the person on the inside of the plant is of course continuing to load chemicals out, but as we realize, no one's actually picking them up. And when he comes out to realize, or I guess to find out where everybody's at, what we see is that the members of the Red Hood gang who were previously taking these chemicals from him and loading them into the vehicles have been strung up on a sign in the shape of a bat. And so what we find is that Batman pursues this last member of the Red Hood gang and then strings him up, presumably leaving him for the police. And so what we do is we jump back to the Batcave here. And again, Bruce Wayne and Alfred are continuing to go over everything they found so far. They're continuing to go over the investigation. And what's really interesting about this is that this is when we really see the character of Batman beginning to take shape. This is when we really begin to see him form. What we had seen with Secret City was that Bruce Wayne was operating as a blunt instrument. He was basically a broadsword swathing away at the criminal element of Gotham. But as Batman, he's more of a precision scalpel, I guess. He's able to carve away at the places that need to be carved at so that he can ultimately form this grander picture here. And this is how all this is beginning to take form. This is how all this is beginning to grow. Of course, we see see that Bruce Wayne and Alfred are discussing the intended plans of the Red Hood gang. And what they come to the realization of is that they're not arbitrarily taking things, that they've been taking chemicals from plants that are owned by Wayne Wayne Industries. More specifically, what the intention seems to be here is that they're most likely going to, gather these chemicals together and detonate them in a kind of bomb of sorts. And so what Bruce Wayne does is he goes to the press, and he basically has the press gather outside of Ace Chemical, and he tells the press that what he's realized is that the intention of the Red Hood gang here is to effectively detonate this bomb in, tomorrow, or as far as it would be the next day. And so what happens is that while Commissioner Gordon is watching these entire events unfold, he ultimately heads to Ace Chemical along with the police and most likely a SWAT team, and they begin the process of trying to take out the Red Hood gang. And so what happens is Bruce Wayne takes this time while he's speaking to enter the Ace Chemical plant. And the reason why this happens is because due to his discussion, due to his talking here, and I guess his announcing the plans of the Red Hood gang attacks Bruce Wayne along with the press. What they actually do here is they shoot rockets down on everybody. And again, what this really tells us is that there doesn't really seem to be a whole lot of concern on behalf of the Red Hood gang in terms of anybody becoming aware of their plans, in the sense that willingly firing missiles towards the press would obviously indicate that there really is no concern here, because as far as we can tell, the intention of the Red Hood gang is that they're probably going to detonate this bomb, and then they don't care what happens next. Their goal is to simply just promote chaos here. And so what happens is that when Batman actually enters Ace Chemical, that he's confronted by the Red Hood. And so when the Red Hood is prepared to actually kill Batman proper, what happens is the lights go out inside of the plant. And so what happens is Bruce Wayne dons his Batman costume and begins going about the process of confronting and subduing these various members of the Red Hood gang, ultimately leading him to confronting Red Hood 1. And this is when Scott Snyder again really points to the Alan Moore story of the Killing Joke as the origin, or the one defining continuity of the Joker. Because what happens here is that while the Red Hood and while Batman are fighting one another, that ultimately the Red Hood falls into a giant vat of chemicals, which is the same thing that we had seen with regards to the Killing Joke, when we had seen that he had fallen into the chemicals under a different set of circumstances. But the fact remains that he fell into these chemicals, which would ultimately go on to allow him to become the Joker. The other reason why we know this to be the case is because this is where Scott Snyder ends the entire story of the Red Hood gang. He simply stops here. And so what he's basically telling us here is that we know how this story plays out. We know how things go from here. And so from here, what this does is effectively lead into Batman becoming a major element of Gotham City. This leads into Batman becoming the superhero for Gotham City, that is to say, Gotham City's protector. And what we'll see, of course, I'll post a reading list in the bottom, is that while this story comes after the events of Night of Owls and Court of Owls, that in more or less following the chronological order of things, this will ultimately lead into those stories. This will lead into the Justice League. This will lead into the Night of Owls and Court of Owls and so on and so forth. But again, this is really just kind of giving us the introduction to how it is that Batman came into existence with regards to the New 52. With that being said, I'm going to go ahead and bring this video to an end. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, let me know, and I will catch you guys later. Peace.